Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the 6-5 podcast, episode 209. 209 times on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday that Mr. Moorhead and I have been here in the chair ready to talk tech. Pat, I'm particularly excited this week about the slate that we have. You know, I love this pod. I love all of you.
But I mean, can I get in here too?
No, I was going to say, how are you feeling? I mean, dude, what a week.
No, what a week. It's kind of crazy. How I mean, so many things going on. It's just like a cornucopia. It's like a play toy, infinite play toys of tech, you know?
Oh my God.
So good.
So good. And by the way, what a week you've had. I mean, brother, you were slaying it on the Twitter this week. Can I call it Twitter? What the heck do we call it?
I don't know.
I totally understand that X is the ultimate app that we're building, but I still feel like we're tweeting. Yeah. But, you know, I got to say, I got a little Twitter envy this week. I went back and looked at you dropping bombs throughout Jensen's keynote, some of the best tweets I think I've ever seen you put out, and not only timely, but thorough. If I was a technologist out there and I wanted to know what Jensen was up to, I would have just followed you right to the moment that you and Jensen were on stage together during his keynote. That was pretty awesome too, by the way.
STI, by the way, I appreciate that. And I've got a lot of long form content coming out from the team and myself. Yeah. So
That's great. Sorry, I just wanted to give you a little wrap because it was super good. I was scrolling this morning as I was prepping for the pod, but listen, we've got a great show this week. We had the NVIDIA event, GTC, Broadcom had earnings, Broadcom had an investor day, Synopsys had an investor day, Micron had a big blowout earnings day. The Apple had the DOJ sue it this week for antitrust and monopolistic behavior. And we've got one more topic, and it slipped my mind, but I'm going to get it back right now. It is Intel. $20 billion in grants. Pat, that was huge news, but somehow in this week, it actually fell right into the middle of the pile.
Yeah, I'm certain that Intel, it's the White House governed, right, on the timing. So
it is. It just kind of gets slipped in there. But, you know, I guess for everyone out there, just remember this show is for information and entertainment purposes only. And while we will be talking a lot about publicly traded companies, please don't take anything we are saying here on the show as investment advice. Pat, I'm going to kick off. I know we've got only about 40 minutes to run through the six topics, 5 minutes each. So see if we can actually do it with the slate we have this week, Pat. But let's start off and talk about GTC, right? I mean, was there a bigger moment? It was the Woodstock of AI. And Pat, I got to be candid, man. Jensen was in his element in the middle of the SAP Center. We couldn't even get onto the floor. There was so much demand. It was a rock concert for AI lovers, and he didn't disappoint. Now, I'm going to kind of give you two things, and there's a lot of oxygen here. No matter how much I talk, there will be a lot of oxygen here. But I want to give you two things to really I came into this looking for. One is I felt like this was the moment that NVIDIA had to secure its place as the technological leader in AI, meaning what is the company going to put forth that clearly says, nobody's catching us. Sure, there's other options. Sure, there's other, there's other SoCs being developed, ASICs, there's other GPU players, there's software abstractions, but we still are the Apple of AI. Ironic this week to say that. The second thing was I was really, really dying to sort of understand how the company was going to advance its kind of customer lock-in, meaning, it's been so clever with the developers and CUDA building that abstraction layer that basically has made it so sticky. And it's like, can they come up with what's next? Can they come up with something else that's going to be as sticky as CUDA's been, especially because you'll hear the competition talking about new compilers. You'll hear them talking about ROCm and One API and JAX and PyTorch. And, you don't need to. You can move the workloads from hardware to hardware. Well, what if you come up with a solution that makes it even stickier there to be running everything on NVIDIA's hardware? So, of course, I will comment briefly on Blackwell. Now, again, Blackwell is a chip, but Blackwell is part of the GB, the Grace Blackwell. And basically, Blackwell is going to be a system, right? There's really nobody's going to buy a Blackwell chip. You're going to buy a system. It's going to be a large system. And it's going to be, what did someone on the competitive side say? Oh, an AI mainframe. I mean, we're in the era now where we're going to stitch all this together. It's going to be connectivity. It's going to be compute. It's going to be GPUs, CPUs, cores. It's going to be Link, NVLink. It's going to be InfiniBand. It's going to be in a massive rack. And by the way, it's going to be more economical to do it that way if you're an NVIDIA shop, and it's going to be take up less real estate. And by the way, that's really, really important. People, data centers, there's limited space, limited power. And this is something that he was very, very prudent to be speaking to. So long and short of it, I'll give a couple specs. You'll probably give some other ones too. They're talking about workload performance increase on the inference side with Grace by about 30 times, depending on the floating point, and energy cuts by as much as 25 times. So this was a big topic because we've talked a lot about how much power hogs GPUs can be. So they made some big advancements on inference, which has been something that AMD had made some big strides on. And then they made some advancements on lesser power. They also basically, just to give you kind of a relative data point, 8,000, so on a previous training model of 1.8 trillion parameters, it would have taken 8,000 Hopper GPUs and 15 megawatts of power. NVIDIA is saying now that 2,000 GPUs, Blackwell, so about a quarter of which, and it'll do it at a quarter, about 4 megawatts of power. So that was a really interesting data point. So because we're going time fast, I'll just say one other thing I wanted to talk about was the NIMS platform. One of the things I think NVIDIA really wanted to get stickier to is going to be the on-prem data and the industry-specific LLMs. He talked about a weather opportunity. He talked a lot about healthcare LLMs, but being able to take a microservices architecture with a container, be able to put the libraries, the software, the hardware infrastructure, on-prem, off-prem, so cloud and hybrid architectures, connect it to APIs, and enable a company to take like a ServiceNow architecture, combine it with NVIDIA hardware, and do so in basically a drag and drop, more or less, quote unquote, container. I think that's really interesting. And Pat, why do I think it's so interesting? Because they don't yet own everybody's prem data. But now you take all that prem data, put it in the container, and make it available for compute, for accelerated compute. That's really sticky. So final thought, what I said is, did they achieve the two things? One, technological superiority. I think they did for the moment, and it's not over. I don't know that they've compelled anybody. Stock didn't move a ton because of this. And two, this whole NIMS architecture, super powerful in terms of connecting the prem data, private LLMs that are going to become more pervasive as these big LLMs are limited to such a small number of customers, Pat.
But you covered a lot, and there is just so much to cover. We could have done this entire podcast.
It could have been.
So here's what I'm going to focus on. First of all, springboarding off of NIMS. NIMS is the next new lock-in. So like 13 years ago, 15 years ago, when CUDA came out, it was literally the driver set. And then that moved to developer tools, that moved to ML frameworks, that moved to models from NVIDIA that you can use, to a full-up enterprise stack that gets preloaded on Dell, HPE, and Lenovo infrastructure. What NIMS does is it really takes that to the next level and makes it easier for application development providers like Adobe and SAP and ServiceNow to connect with data platforms like Cloudera, Snowbricks, NetApp, folks like that. And then connecting the big model builders with the AI infrastructure. And this will make it easy for people, if you're all in on NVIDIA. You cannot, however, leverage this to an AMD, an Intel, a Grok, an Untether AI. So enterprises and partners do need to weigh the potential lock-in. But I got to tell you, at the beginning of a boom cycle, you probably have to do this. right? Because none of the competitors are close to offering something like this. But yeah, so two edges on that. On Blackwell, absolutely amazing. It's an absolute total beast. I want to get Signal 65's Ryan Trout on some of the claims. The claims for energy efficiency and inference have to do with not just the chip, but an entire cluster. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the comparison I want to see. And as a reminder, in comparison to both AMD and Intel and all the AI SoCs out there, this is something that doesn't ship to the end of the year. Okay. And what's being compared, let's say, even on the MI from AMD, is what is shipping in right now. Okay. But that's not to take any credit away from NVIDIA at all. On the platform side, on the hardware platform side, I do consider NIM part of the software platform. The networking in the rack and the switch, and then connecting rack to rack is amazing to see. Once we get to Broadcom, right, we might have the debate on Ethernet versus what NVIDIA is cooking up here. But overall, NVIDIA did nothing but gain ground. They certainly didn't lose ground.
Yeah, that's great analysis. Like you said, I think we could do a whole show on this. Had to move quickly, but I love the fact that you pointed out what's to market today, Pat, versus what will be in the market in the future. Let's move on and talk about a really compelling counterpoint to some of that. When Broadcom hosted its Enabling AI Infrastructure Investor meeting, you and I, Pat, were there, and I think we both walked away impressed.
Yeah, it was an investor meeting, and there were 3 other analyst firms there, which is a very tight-knit group. There were no press, no pictures were allowed. I mean, it was quite the event, and this is really a coming out party for Charlie Kawwas, president. He runs all of semiconductors, all 17 business units. And this focus was really on what is Broadcom doing in terms of AI connectivity and an AI accelerator. Coming right off the NVIDIA event, right? People wanted to know, hey, what are all these accelerators that Broadcom is working on? I learned a lot. I'm not one of these analysts who says, oh, I know everything. I don't. And it was a learning exercise for me. First off, they brought out a third design. All 3 of them are consumer, right? Rumor has it that the first 2 are Google and Meta. What's the third one? Who knows? These are also not networking. These are not AI ASICs. Sure, it includes a compute ASIC, but these are full up SoCs without a CPU, right? It has compute, memory, network IO, storage on there. By the way, the other brain explosion here was the 1 year from design beginning to ramp. And when you think about an ASIC, you're typically looking at a 3 to 4 years. So hypothetically, they could crank out a new one every 18 months for a customer. And that is just absolutely absurdly fast. A lot of this comes to them doing this for the last decade. So pretty amazing. I think the second thing was Ethernet versus InfiniBand, right? Connecting GPUs, custom accelerators, and merchant accelerators. And I got to tell you, if you're a hyperscaler or an enterprise that wants to connect all 3 types of accelerators, Ethernet is absolutely what you need for scale out. I came convinced. 10% performance advantage, a 30% reliability advantage, cost advantage, the standards. I mean, it's just crazy. And let's not forget Thor 2, not a smart NIC, but heavy duty RDMA for a single memory plane. Pretty amazing. I did like the going through and showing how many clusters Amazon, Oracle, Meta, ByteDance, right? I think 130,000 AI clusters with Ethernet. So I came away really just all in on Ethernet. It's not that fiber channel is bad. It's just that Ethernet is even better. So in the rack, right, Jess Tremblay did a nice discussion on inside the rack. And essentially that's connecting CPU, GPU, NICs, AI accelerators, and storage. And they dominate this market, by the way. You can look at Dell, HPE, Lenovo, Supermicro Systems, and PCIe switch from Broadcom has been the staple of that. And I think I don't see any reason why that's not going to be in the future. And a little flashback to AMD's AI event was PCI Gen 7 switch. So PCIe, low latency. Again, this company just dominates here. Co-packaged optics, right? So instead of having 140 transceivers in a system, you have this super duper cool CPO, co-packaged optics module. And this has been in discussion forever, but they're actually shipping this now. So if you want lower power, increased reliability, lowest cost per bit, CPO looks like an amazing option. It's almost like a no-brainer. I left wondering, like, what am I missing here, right? Like, what do I not understand from this? And then finally, I'll end this. SerDes is the basis of all analog goodness, and they've got this 200 gig SerDes based on 3 nanometer that bodes well for the future of Broadcom, quite frankly, and gets in the business of Marvell with PAM4. So great stuff.
Woo! Take a breath, buddy. Listen, I'm gonna make this I'm gonna really try to dumb down my thoughts here.
And by the way, I meant Ethernet versus InfiniBand.
Yeah,
sorry.
Absolutely. I'm just going to try to, what did I come away with here? I want to do an analogy. We're going to talk about Apple later, but here's my analogy is that we're going to start to see market shift to a normalization in a sort of a two-space market. And by the way, there's two players, but player one is NVIDIA, end-to-end, everything. Player two is everyone else, literally the rest of the ecosystem. It's all the other chip makers. It's other infrastructure providers. It's going to be a collaboration. This is kind of that open AI, open Ethernet, all these consortiums. And so NVIDIA is Apple in this case. And InfiniBand, NVLink, the whole build-in of chips and infrastructure and hardware and connectors and cables. And it's going to be this totally vertically integrated solution here. And then the other side of it, Ethernet, is going to be the open. It's going to be Google and Android. I mean, this is how I'm looking at this thing, right? And the reason I'm saying this is in the end, they're both very viable solutions. And that's really what I came away with. Jensen kind of got on stage and goes, it's not viable. And we went to this thing and it comes back. It's like, well, it seems viable. I mean, you get at least equal, if not better performance in optimal settings. You actually do it for less money, which is economical, which is important to people. And there's a couple other things I thought was really prudent that they talked about, like the fragility of InfiniBand. Like they talked about, keeping, that InfiniBand kind of has a higher fail rate, having those cables sitting and ready at any given point, versus Ethernet, which is a little bit more stable. But the way I kind of walked away from it is Broadcom's going to be kind of at the center of Android. And so this network backplane and this network plane that's going to have to connect all these XPUs or all this compute is going to be done one of two ways. And we're actually seeing this war playing out, by the way, in other places. We're seeing it play out with the hyperscalers, right? The hyperscalers are playing out right now because some are sort of adopting the all-in NVIDIA and reselling it. And others are saying, well, we want to control the network. We're not going to use their connectivity. We've got our own plane. And I think people could figure out who we're talking about. But in the end, I think the market ends up being split. And I think it ends up being much closer to parity. And NVIDIA is going to be really, really big. And by the way, this is a multi-trillion-dollar ultimate market with hundreds of billions of GPUs and then all the peripherals and the stuff. And I think that's how it plays out. Now, a couple of just really quick things on the overall AI story. Look, the semiconductor business, everything about Broadcom has been about VMware, but the semiconductor business is growing healthily. They were able to basically say now that in 24, 25% of its revenue is AI related. And actually, they're accelerating that forecast now to 35%.
That's right.
About $10 billion. They've got 3 mega customers now that are planning to work on their XPUs. No one knows who they are. There is some suspicion of who they are. I think it might be a company that is fruit related. It could be this new big customer. But again, no speculation, heard nothing. This is just my opinion. But I want it on the record in case I end up being right about this later. Pat, there's so much more. But we've got a lot of podcasts left to do and not a ton of time. So I'm going to move to the third topic, which is Intel finally gets some money from the CHIPS Act. Now, I want everyone to remember when this CHIPS Act actually came into to play. It was approved in 23? No, it was in 2022. So you want the government to drive the future of innovation. Look how fast they move. Now, just remember, when they actually approved this, nobody was using ChatGPT yet.
By the way, look who started it, too. It wasn't even under this administration.
No. It's brutal how slow this stuff proliferates and progresses. The good news is it happened. The bad news is it's not enough. And by the way, this was a big part of the Pat Gelsinger discussion. I think they gave him about $8.5 billion in grants, another $11 billion in loans. And, based on the way we're running up our global debt in the U.S., it was $1.25 trillion now that we're creating in debt. It feels like $52 billion is not enough money for the most important technological revolution on the planet in the U.S.'s ability to substantiate, legitimize, and protect its long-term interests. Now, having said that, this will go a long way to getting Intel superfabs off the ground. We will need somewhere in the U.S., somewhere in the West, to be able to produce all these XPUs, to be able to produce all these GPUs, to be able to, and Intel is a viable option for this. Pat, I've been on the record for a while. I've said the foundry business might be the most interesting business that Intel has. That's not to say the other parts of the business aren't interesting. I'm just saying that right now with this AI growth, TSMC cannot take 100% of this on. I'm sorry, it will not happen. Pat, I don't feel like it was optimal, though. I don't feel like what they got was really what they had hoped for or what they wanted. I feel like this was a little bit, there were some concessions here. 11 billion of loans versus 20 billion, including grants, felt like a bit of a kick in the teeth for the company that has raised its hand, stepped up and said, we will be the company that will bring manufacturing at the leading edge from a U.S. domestic company back. And now you are also hearing about Samsung getting money, TSMC getting money. Lots of non-U.S. based companies are seemingly lined up to get dollars here. And that's okay. Those are our partners and allies. But having said that, I don't know that we're solving as much of the problem as we need. And again, I go back and say there is no way in heck that 52, 53, whatever it was, 52, $53 billion is enough if we want to maintain global leadership in technology. And the way we spend money on other things, wars and other things that do not apply to us, it just absolutely blows my mind that we are not spending more money to make sure we lead in the most important technological revolution that will drive national security, technology leadership, and supply chain resilience around the world.
I'm going to just do some really quick hits here. I was asked by a press, who's the loser here? And the loser is TSMC. TSMC will get money, but based on the fact that TSMC isn't going to bring their best to Arizona, A, and B, their chairman and senior executives. Right?
They're only bringing 7.
Their chairman and chief executives are calling U.S. workers lazy, which, by the way, even if it were true, you don't have one hand and then slap somebody across the face. But some even historical stuff is coming out from TSMC in the way that they've talked about other cultures and companies. And by the way, it's driving U.S.-based semiconductor companies crazy at how TSMC executives pull me aside and tell them how disappointed they are in the way that TSMC is operating here. The other question I get is this enough? And the short answer is no. There will need to be a CHIPS Act 2 and a CHIPS Act 3 until we get to some form of automation and replication to build these foundries. Congratulations to Intel. By the way, I was one of the only analysts 3 years ago that gave Intel a chance. If I got $1 for every person who came along and said that they should divest, I said, you are completely freaking crazy because Intel's not ready to do that. Maybe when they get off their, they get liftoff with 18A and they've got Columbus up and running, then you might be able to do that. But now, dumb.
Hey, I just want to say that there was another analyst that gave them a chance that actually has written the bull case, has taken a lot of shit, a lot of flack from people.
A lot of beep.
God, should we beep that out? Never mind. Let's just keep going.
Well,
I want this pod to be authentic, Pat Moorhead.
Beep.
We said it. We stick by it. We get it right a lot more than we get it wrong. We aren't going to say we never get it wrong. We'll just never remind you that we got it wrong. You're going to have to find that stuff yourself. Anyway, Pat, let's move on to another topic you and I are passionate about. We are not Apple fanboys. We do use Apple stuff. And we have said for a long time that there needs to be some antitrust brought to Apple. What do you think about what ended up being brought to Apple this week?
So we don't do news, but I think we do need to do some background on this. So Department of Justice in 16 states has accused Apple of being an illegal monopoly. And I don't want to start even where the 88-page DOJ documents are. I want to talk about market definition. And that is the core of any type of antitrust case. And they're accusing the company of having a durable monopoly, durable meaning gone on for a long time. It's not some one hit wonder in two markets: performance smartphones, where they said they have a 70% market share, otherwise known as flagship and premium, and then 60% market share in smartphones. I think the DOJ did Apple a favor. They could have done it on revenue share or profit share, which would be like 90%. And then secondly, the durability, if you needed to drill down on that, it's been going on for a decade. So what's the harm? Sherman Act, Section 2, harm competition, less choice, higher prices and fees, lower quality, and less innovation. And it focused on 5 areas. Super apps, think of it like if you're a game studio and you want to have everything in one app. Cloud streaming apps like game streaming, messaging apps like iMessage, and digital wallets. So essentially on the super app side, harms developers by preventing them from innovating and selling products. Cloud streaming apps harms developers by preventing developers artificially constraining the size of the user base. Keeps them from selling games to such users. By the way, we saw this with Google, by the way, and folks like Epic, and I believe that Microsoft, although they weren't too loud on it, would like a crack at cloud stream apps like gaming. Messaging apps, it's iMessage, it's locked down. And DOJ says it harms developers by artificially constraining the size of their user bases. Okay, that makes sense. Smartwatches. This was an interesting one. I didn't expect this one, Dan. Essentially saying by limiting the ability to respond to notifications, Apple has denied users access to high-performing smartwatches with preferred styling, better user interfaces and services, or better batteries. Harms smartwatch developers. Finally, you can only have one digital wallet on an iPhone, and it's Apple, and they have engorged profits on all of that. Maybe you want Bank of America app that works everywhere. It's not going to work. Anyways, that's the upshot. I'm going to throw just one more thing. I've left you a ton of oxygen. I did like what it say, because a lot of what Apple says it does because a better experience. By the way, they do deliver a good experience, kind of like a mainframe, kind of like the NVIDIA full platform, but they have smoking gun emails from Apple executives, by the way, going all the way back to Steve Jobs, that said there were planned lock-in of the users. Apple also talks about, I'm going to read this. Apple selectively compromises privacy and security interests when it suits its financial and business interests. But Apple imposes contractual restraints and restrictions that are more restrictions than necessary to protect user privacy and security. I think Apple is screwed. They're going to lose. They will fight this. They're going to get into so much trouble. I'm just trying to figure out, is this going to be the 3 Arctic years like it was with Microsoft? Or is this going to be a devastating blow like AT&T? Probably not AT&T. They're not going to get broken up. But this is going to leave a wound.
Buddy, great assessment. I want to play the basics here, because you and I, by the way, you and I both are very critical of Apple's business model. I do want to say that I think the DOJ messed up. I think they messed up because I don't know why they're focused on the phone. And there's so much centrism to this about the phone. And the thing is the phone, there's choice, meaning nobody has to use an Apple phone. And what they do in the App Store is the most anti-competitive, most, aggressive behavior. What they've jacked up the developer fees, how they lock you into this ecosystem. They create so much your business dependency, and then they keep raising fees and raising fees. Very anti-competitive. And these businesses have no choice but to participate. Having said that, when you get to the phone, I feel like there is choice. You can go buy a Samsung, go use Android. And so this is why I'm conflicted, is why can the US and antitrust and regulators and Lida Khan never get it right? Meaning, why can't they focus on the right thing? The right thing is the App Store. The App Store is monopolistic, anti-competitive, and they are absolutely abusive of their power. And it harms consumers because it drives up prices, and it ends up meaning people that choose the platform cannot shop. They cannot have any opportunity to pick different options. I like that you pointed out the wallet. As we move to digital currency and people are going to be paying exclusively on devices, why can't we have different payment options on the phone? Other platforms do allow that. And so you could see, Pat, by the way, there's a lot of likeness in this to, your merchant services. They're just saying, like, merchant services have been driven down to a much lower fee because it was seen as anti-competitive for these merchant services to drive up costs to all the merchants, which ultimately drives up costs to the consumer. The problem I've always had, Pat, with antitrust against Apple is that people do like Apple. The users like Apple. And so while there is anti-competitive behavior, it is consumer harm driving up prices. What it doesn't do is actually often discourage people from wanting to use the platform, because people that use iOS every day, mostly for the messaging, which, by the way, another sort of anti-competitive thing they've done with not allowing messaging to be easy between different platforms. Well, the people like it. And so that tends to put Apple in a good light. Having said that, all this, Pat, Apple's a disaster right now. I really do. Like, I was going to tweet something earlier, dude. I was like, remember Vision Pro? What happened to that? Is it over already? I haven't seen anybody driving around town with a Vision Pro, but I do still see Cybertrucks. So I think Elon's going to be okay. All right. We've got a whole bunch more topics. 2 more topics, and we're going to have to move fast. So let's talk about Micron. I shared a chart. I'm going to keep this one pretty simple and easy because I want to make sure we get to Synopsys, which was just chock full of good stuff. But Micron crushed it. They absolutely crushed it. And nobody saw this coming, but maybe, I don't know, maybe a couple of analysts that said, hey, at some point with all this AI silicon, you're going to need some high bandwidth memory in order to do this stuff. You're hearing rumors about high bandwidth memory advancements coming from SK, from Samsung. Well, Micron's had a whole bunch of innovation with its 232-layer NAND, HBM upgrades, and they're starting to see the momentum. They went from $1 billion+ loss last quarter to nearly $1 billion profit in one quarter. The stock jumped to its highest price since, I think it was like 2000, Pat. It literally saw a jump. It looked a little bit like Dell after the earnings, when everyone's like, holy crap, this company has a play. Yes, people, if you are seeing growth in XPUs and GPUs and CPUs, doing advanced AI stuff, we're going to need a whole bunch of high bandwidth memory to get that done. Micron's got a play. It's got a big play. It saw its margin grow. It saw its revenue grow. It's seen cash flow being generated, Pat. And in a single candle, and I showed that in my tweet, you saw the difference of people finally understanding that Micron is part of the AI story. So I'm going to keep it fast. We can get to Synopsys, but I'll pass this one over to you.
January 2nd, 2024, from Colorado, USA, Patrick Moorhead tweets, "The memory boom is back." I put up P&Ls from Micron, SK Hynix, and threw at least the semiconductor P&L in there from Samsung. Yeah, called it. This one's easy, dude. I mean, I spent 10 years in infrastructure, 11 years at AMD, and it's like, it's boom and bust. There is no in between. And we are now going into a boom. Everybody's going to be complaining about lack of availability. And all three of these companies are going to be printing
margin expansion, pricing power. Whoo!
No, totally. And then you're going to hear, what's going to be really interesting is with the new storage and memory requirements from AI smartphones and PCs, how's that going to work out, right? But in the end, this insatiable need, I like to call it the quadrangle between, the processing, storage, memory, networking, right? And here we are. This one is going to have some interesting impacts on pricing. But listen, these companies put billions of investment, and they should be rewarded.
Absolutely, Pat. Good call. I can't believe you found that tweet. You know how much this guy tweets. I mean, there was a little bit of self-reflection going on there. All right. So, Pat, last one. You put out a really, really thoughtful, hey, after this Broadcom day and all the complexity of PAM4 and optics and this Synopsys EDA stuff is actually really easy to get. And you put a really thoughtful post. Why don't you run us through what Synopsys had to say?
Yeah, so first and foremost, they had to get two things across. One thing, Synopsys without Ansys is doing great. And then secondly, Synopsys plus Ansys makes it even better. But one thing I really appreciated is that the company actually described what they do in a way that people, that I think anybody related to chips could understand, all the way from design going all the way to the fab and foundry and everything in between. That's really hard to do. Now, 2 years ago, it dawned on me with more transportable IP, chiplets, and by the way, IP that's qualified all the way to the foundry, and the improvements in the tools, and you layer on top of that AI, to literally co-pilots. And this is something Synopsys was the first one to work on. They're not the only one that's doing it now, but they did come out with it first. You have something that's just going to be incredible, right? This is how AWS can do their own chips. This is how Tesla can do their own chips. Once we get farther on, I think you're not going to need $100-200 million to do a full chip. And you might see Dell Technologies be able to afford to do their own chips, given their scale and capability. Much smaller companies. So this is an exciting time. I'm going to end with Ansys. Kind of a joke. It took me 15 seconds once the announcement was made, and think of Synopsys as the electronics world, and think of Ansys as electromechanical designs like cars, airplane, jet engines, stuff like that. And with the need for time to market and shrinking, having one company being able to connect that, if you're an end user, I can do AWS chiplet, I can do the SoC, I can do the PCA, I can do the rack, I can do the fleet, I can do the freaking data center and all the flow of air going in there. Anyways, that's a no-brainer to me. Do they pay too much? I don't know, but they were in a bidding war with Cadence.
Well, I'll tell you what, Pat, I thought IBM paid too much for Red Hat. And I think they probably could have paid more, because had they not made that decision, that I think there would have been some really long-term troubles for the company. I think AMD, what they paid for Xilinx, you could look at that and say that was a lot. And I think in the end, they're probably not going to regret what they paid for Xilinx. I think a lot of times, Pat, we got to give some credit to these executives, founders, boards, and visionaries, that they do understand what they're looking at, and they do understand what's at stake. You know how smart Jensen was to try to buy ARM. Just imagine had that gotten done, by the way. Just imagine the situation NVIDIA would be in had they actually. So regulators might have got that one right. I mean, even more so than I would have thought so. Anyways, Synopsys, Pat, you kind of hit the technical stuff. I want to say something that was very interesting to me. It drove a tweet, and I wanted to share this. If over the last 3 years, there's only one company in the Magnificent Seven that would have delivered you a better return than had you invested in Synopsys stock. And that company is NVIDIA. So just take that into perspective. I have two things to say. One, silicon eats the world. Okay. So everything you just said is because jet planes and cities and telco and banks and everything runs on silicon. Software just sits on top of it, people. You got to develop silicon. Where are you going to go? You got a couple of options, and Synopsys right now is the leader. And then, of course, the other side of it is that EDA is cool, because we are democratizing the development of chips. Okay. All these companies that have got into quote unquote homegrown silicon, never going to happen without a company like Synopsys. They've made it happen, and the market's rewarding it. And so I think this tie-up is going to be great, Pat. And I think Synopsys had a really compelling day. Are we bullish on everything? No, but are we bullish on this? Gosh, it seems like a really good outlook. So, hey, we did it. 40 minutes, man. We did this pod. Usually with these topics and all the things that I would have wanted to say and you would have wanted to say, there was no way we could do this in under an hour. But having said that, Pat, great show, man. I'm in such a good mood. I was in such a bad mood before we started, but this podcast is my favorite thing. And by the way, Daniel, Mike, Keith, we had a great chat going. I was watching what you all were saying. Thank you so much for participating and kind of giving feedback. Can't always get the comments into the show, but we love that our audience is in there, is engaged, is tying up, and share this stuff. So hit that subscribe button. Join us. Be with us every single week here on the pod. We've got lots here. We got the 6.5 Summit coming. Bill McDermott at the helm. Lots of other exciting speakers to announce. Pat, we're going to be at RSA. We're at Enterprise Connect. The 6.5 is everywhere. We appreciate all you joining us, but we got to go. We'll see you all later.